Remember 2008? That housing crisis was a real eye-opener. People lost homes, jobs, and savings. It was a financial disaster. But what if I told you that was just a preview, a small shakeup compared to the seismic shift that's happening beneath our feet right now? Get ready, because we're about to explore the frightening possibility of another housing crash, one that could make 2008 seem mild. Think of it like this. 2008 was a tremor. This time we're talking about a major earthquake. The signs are everywhere, from skyrocketing housing prices to rising interest rates and a looming recession. It's a perfect storm of economic factors that has experts concerned and regular folks like you and me wondering if we should be preparing for the worst. The scariest part? This time, it's not just about subprime mortgages and irresponsible lending practices. We're dealing with a whole new set of economic challenges: inflation, supply chain disruptions, and a global housing bubble that's on the verge of bursting. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's unpack this financial time bomb, shall we? One word: affordability, or rather the lack thereof. Housing prices have been skyrocketing, leaving many people struggling to keep up. It's a classic case of supply and demand. We're not building enough homes to meet the demand, especially affordable ones. When there's too much money chasing too few houses, prices inevitably soar. But that's just the beginning. Remember those historically low interest rates that had everyone refinancing their mortgages? Well, those days are over. The Federal Reserve has been raising interest rates to combat inflation. While this helps slow down the economy, it makes buying a house or refinancing a mortgage much harder. Combine that with rising inflation, where everything from groceries to gas costs more, and you have a serious problem. Families are feeling the financial squeeze from all directions. The big question is, what will give first? Will it be the housing market that collapses, or will American families buckle under the pressure? Remember those exotic mortgages that got us into trouble back in '08? You know, the ones with no money down, adjustable rate shenanigans? Well, this time around, the problems run deeper. Sure, we've got our fair share of risky lending practices. There's always someone willing to lend money to someone who probably can't afford it. But the real issue is much bigger than that. We're talking about a global economic slowdown, folks. China's economy is sputtering. Europe's grappling with an energy crisis in the United States. Well, let's just say we've got our own set of problems. When the global economy sneezes, the housing market catches a cold. And this time, it looks like the world might be coming down with a nasty case of the flu. Adding fuel to the fire is the rise of institutional investors buying up single-family homes like they're going out of style. These Wall Street behemoths are scooping up properties left and right, turning them into rentals and driving up prices for everyone else. It's enough to make you wonder who the housing market is even for anymore. The Federal Reserve, the masters of the economic universe, are in a bit of a pickle. See, they're trying to tame inflation without completely tanking the economy. It's like trying to walk a tightrope over a pit of angry crocodiles. One false move and it's all over. Their main weapon of choice, interest rates. By raising rates, they're hoping to cool down the economy and slow down inflation. But here's the catch-22. Higher interest rates make it more expensive to borrow money, which could lead to a decrease in consumer spending and, you guessed it, a recession. So the Fed is stuck between a rock and a hard place, raising rates too much, and they risk triggering a recession. Don't raise them enough, and inflation continues to soar, eroding purchasing power and making it even harder for people to afford basic necessities, let alone a house. It's a delicate dance, and the whole world is watching with bated breath. All right, folks, let's take a trip down memory lane. Remember in 2008 when the housing market crashed and burned, dragging the global economy with it? The culprit's a toxic mix of subprime mortgages, relaxed lending standards, and Wall Street greed. Fast forward to today, and we're seeing some eerie similarities. Housing prices are sky high, interest rates are climbing, and there's a general sense of unease. But there are also some key differences this time around. For one, lending standards are much tighter now than they were back then. After getting burned so badly, banks are being a lot more careful about who they lend money to. And let's not forget about the role of technology. The rise of fintech and online lenders has disrupted traditional mortgage lending, making it easier for people to shop around for the best rates and terms. But don't breathe a sigh of relief just yet. While these factors might help mitigate the severity of a potential crash, they don't eliminate the risk entirely. If you found this insightful, make sure to subscribe to Fun Financial Insights and leave a comment down below. Think the U.S. is the only one with housing headaches? Think again. From Canada to Australia, Sweden to China, the world is in the throes of a global housing bubble. It's like a game of musical chairs, but with houses instead of seats. And when the music stops, someone's going to be left standing and likely without a place to live. Take Canada, for example. Our neighbors to the north have seen their housing prices skyrocket in recent years, fueled by low interest rates and shortage of supply. In Toronto and Vancouver, it's not uncommon to see homes selling for millions of dollars, and that's Canadian dollars, folks. And then there's China, where the collapse of Evergrande, a massive property developer, sent shockwaves throughout the global economy. The Chinese government is trying to deflate their housing bubble without causing a full-blown collapse. But it's a delicate balancing act. If they don't get it right, the consequences could be dire, not just for China, but for the world. Remember that whole house of cards analogy people like to throw around? Well, it's essentially apt when talking about the economy. When one key sector, like the housing market, starts to wobble, it can set off a chain reaction that brings the whole darn thing crashing down. So let's connect the dots, shall we? When housing prices fall, people feel less wealthy. That means they're less likely to spend money, which hurts businesses and leads to job losses. And when people lose their jobs, they're even less likely to buy houses, which further depresses the housing market. It's a vicious cycle, my friends, but it doesn't stop there. A housing crash could also lead to a credit crunch as banks become more reluctant to lend money. This could make it harder for businesses to invest and grow, further slowing down the economy. And if the crash is severe enough, it could even trigger a global recession, just like it did in 2008. So we've established that housing prices are bonkers, but what does that actually mean for regular folks like you and me? Well, for starters, it means that the American dream of owning a home is becoming increasingly out of reach for many, particularly millennials and Gen Z. Imagine this. You're a young professional working your tail off, but you can barely afford to rent a tiny apartment, let alone buy a house. You're stuck in a perpetual cycle of renting, unable to build equity or put down roots. Sound familiar? But the real cost of inflated housing prices goes beyond just individual dreams. It's about families being priced out of their communities, forced to move further away from jobs, schools, and support networks. It's about the widening wealth gap between homeowners and renters, as those who were lucky enough to buy before the boom continue to reap the benefits, while others are left behind. While a housing crash would undoubtedly be bad news for everyone, some segments of the population are more vulnerable than others. First-time home buyers, those who purchase their homes at the peak of the market with little money down, and those in areas with rapidly declining home values are likely to feel the most pain. Think of it like this. If you bought a house at the peak of the market and prices drop by 20%, you're suddenly underwater on your mortgage, owing more than your house is worth. It's a worst-case scenario. You might even face foreclosure. But it's not just about individual homeowners. A housing crash could also have a devastating impact on communities, particularly those that are already struggling. As home values decline, so do property taxes, which are a major source of funding for schools, parks, and other essential services. This could lead to a decline in the quality of life in these communities, further exacerbating inequality. So we've painted a pretty bleak picture, haven't we? But before you run for the hills and start building a bunker, let's take a deep breath and talk about what we can do to navigate this uncertain future. First and foremost, knowledge is power. The more you understand about the housing market, the economy, and the factors that are driving these trends, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions about your financial future. Second, don't panic. While a housing crash is certainly a possibility, it's not a foregone conclusion. The economy is a complex beast, and there are many factors that could influence the direction of the housing market in the coming years. Finally, be prepared. If you're thinking about buying a home, make sure you're doing so for the right reasons and not just because you're afraid of being priced out. And if you're already a homeowner, make sure you have a solid financial plan in place just in case the unexpected happens. For generations, the American dream has been synonymous with home ownership. A picket fence, a backyard barbecue, a place to call your own. But as housing prices spiral out of control, that dream is starting to feel more like a nightmare for many Americans. The idea of owning a home, once a symbol of prosperity and stability, has become a source of stress, anxiety, and even despair for many. The financial burden of a mortgage, especially in today's economy, can be overwhelming, forcing families to make difficult choices between basic needs and the dream of home ownership. The question we need to ask ourselves is this: what happens to the American dream when the cost of entry is so high that it's no longer attainable for a significant portion of the population? What happens to the fabric of our society when entire generations are priced out of home ownership? The future of the housing market is as clear as mud. Will we see a repeat of 2008, or will the outcome be different this time around? Honestly, your guess is as good as mine. But one thing's for sure, it's going to be a bumpy ride. The forces at play are complex and interconnected, and predicting the future is a fool's errand. By understanding the risks, staying informed, and being prepared, we can navigate the turbulence and hopefully come out on the other side in one piece. So buckle up, hold on tight, and get ready for the ride of your life. Because when it comes to the housing market, well, one thing's for certain: it's never a dull moment. Hey, don't forget to subscribe to Fun Financial Insights and leave a comment below.